Hey, LifeGate families. In collectives and homes, we want to be a people who do not just know the story of God, but find ourselves living inside of it. This is a place to be honest and unhurried, where every voice belongs. So make room for one another and let the quieter people speak. So far, we've explored play as creative, delight, and wonder. Today, Pastor Jonathan leads us into play as story. We are story-shaped people, and play is one of the ways our imagination really comes alive. When we play with story, we practice seeing our own lives inside God's bigger story. As you watch, pause and play together, and do not rush this. Let people tell their stories without fixing or interrupting. The imagination is a muscle, and play is how we stretch it.
Growing up, I was in on all things Bruce Lee, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris. If you know, you know. I loved movies like Enter the Dragon and Bloodsport, Walker, Texas Ranger. I couldn't get enough of it. In fact, my cousin Nate and I would plant ourselves in front of a TV and just absorb everything. Every kick, every block, every slow motion finishing move. And then we'd go outside and we'd become those characters. We went out and bought nunchucks and ninja swords. And then we'd square up on each other and go at it. We'd get on the trampoline and attempt flying kicks, which inevitably would always land one of us in the ER. And nobody was teaching us anything. Nobody gave us a curriculum. We just watched the stories, and then we'd go outside and start living in them. Because that's just what kids do. They don't analyze the story. They climb inside of it. They experience it. And then at some point you grow up, and somewhere along the way you stop doing that. Fast forward about 30 years, and I'm about to turn 40. I'm having a little bit of an existential crisis, and I happen to put on a podcast by a guy named Jocko Willink. And he says, "You're turning 40? How about you start doing some hard things? Go join a gym, start doing jujitsu." And that just clicked. And just like that, the kid who used to love Bruce Lee is in an actual MMA gym. And I can still remember the first time I walked into that gym. I felt like I was carrying everything. I was thinking about finances and deadlines, career questions. I was processing whether or not I was spending enough time with my kids and being present with my wife. I felt like every burden, every weight was sitting heavy on my chest. And then class starts, and poof, it's gone. All of it, just gone. Because when you have a 210-pound killer trying to choke you out, you don't have the option to think about your to-do list. All that exists is the next 5 minutes. How do I not get dominated? How do I not hurt myself? Basically, how do I survive this? And for the first time all week, and really in a long time, I felt completely present, completely alive, completely inside the moment I'm actually in. In his book, The Storytelling Animal, Jonathan Gottschall argues that we're all living inside of some sort of story. And these stories, we really don't choose them consciously. We absorb them. We absorb them from our parents, from our experiences, our failures, our bank account, the way that our last job ended. And those stories are quietly and constantly forming us, whether we know that or not. Most of us, now as adults, are living inside a productivity story. It tells you what a good day looks like. It tells you what you're worth. It tells you what you're allowed to feel good about. And it's merciless because it has no ending. There's no moment where it says, you've done enough. You just keep going. A few weeks ago, Pastor Liz asked us when we stopped making things just because they were good. When did we stop singing unless we were good enough? When did we stop drawing because someone else would praise us? When we stopped playing unless we could win? I think the answer is simpler than we want it to be. We stopped because the productivity story told us to, and we believed it. Here's what I find interesting, though. Play is the one thing that exposes which story you're actually living in. Not the one that you say you're in, the real one. Because you can fake a lot of things. You can perform generosity. You can go through the motions of prayer. You can show up and look the part. But you can't fake play. The moment you're forcing it, managing it, trying to produce something from it, it stops being play. It becomes performance. And performance is just the productivity story in costume. At one point, the disciples come to Jesus and ask him, "Who's the greatest in the kingdom?" And Jesus puts a child right in the center of the room. In the first century, a child had no status, no productivity, no social capital. A child couldn't contribute anything meaningful by any measure that the culture cared about. And Jesus looks at his disciples and says, "The kingdom belongs to people like this." The child plays because the child has no other mode. No performance anxiety, no resume to protect, no outcome to manage. Play is the natural state of someone who isn't trying to justify their existence. The person who can't play anymore has, at some level, stopped believing they're loved without earning it. That's the productivity story. And it always ends with you having to prove something. The kingdom story, however, starts with you already being loved. Play shows us, it shows you which one you actually believe. At one point in his ministry, Jesus is surrounded by a massive crowd. People are pressing in from every direction, and they want to know, what is the kingdom of God actually like? And here's another interesting point. Jesus doesn't give them a definition. He doesn't hand them a theology. In fact, he tells them a story. He tells them a bunch of stories. The kingdom is like a mustard seed, the smallest seed you can plant, which becomes the biggest thing in a garden. He says it's like a man who finds a treasure buried in a field and sells everything he owns just to buy that field. The kingdom is like a merchant who spends his whole life looking for one perfect pearl, and when he finds it, he liquidates everything. No definitions, no bullet points, just picture after picture after picture. Because Jesus knows something about how humans actually work. You don't just think your way into the kingdom, you taste it, you experience it. The imagination has to be activated before the will can follow. Abstraction can't do that. A concept can't do that. Only a story can do that. And that's why Jesus tells stories, not to illustrate truth, but to create the conditions where truth can actually be received. My cousin Nate and I weren't analyzing Bruce Lee. We were climbing inside the story and rehearsing it on a trampoline in the backyard. The kid that's formed by K-pop Demon Hunter plays K-pop Demon Hunter. The kid raised on Star Wars plays Star Wars. This isn't imitation, it's apprenticeship. They're learning to live inside a story by rehearsing it in a space where the stakes are low enough to experiment. And adults do the exact same thing. Our ambitions, our anxieties, our daily routines, all of it is us playing out the story we believe we're in. We just don't call it play. We call it real life. In Luke 24, we see two men walking to Emmaus after the crucifixion. Everything's collapsed. The story they thought they were in is over. And a stranger falls into step with them and starts walking them through the whole sweep of God's story. Something happens to them before they can explain it. And they describe it later on. They say, our hearts were burning. They don't understand yet, but they're feeling something. Something's happening in them before their minds can actually catch up. Imagination first, then understanding. Play is how you practice that sequence. When you play, you have to be present, fully in the moment you're actually in. When you play, you have to receive what you're given and respond. You can't script it. When you play, you have to trust the story is going somewhere, even when you can't see where. So here's what we're going to do tonight. And I want you to pay attention to what happens inside of you when we're actually doing it. Because the reaction, the urge to do it well, to win, to look good, to get it right, that's your story showing up right there at the table. We're going to write out our week in exactly 6 words. Not your highlight reel, but your actual week. Pay attention to what you reach for, because what you reach for tells you which story you're in. The second thing is I want you to pass a story around the table. 1 sentence each is a completely new story. You can't plan your line, okay? Because you don't know what you'll be handed. You have to receive what someone else gives you and build on it. You have to trust that the story is going somewhere, even when you can't see where. Pay attention to how hard that is, because that's the whole thing right there. That's what it feels like to stop performing and start playing. And that's what it feels like to live inside a story that's bigger than you. You're already being formed by a story. The only question is, which one? Play is how you find out, and how you begin slowly to choose differently. Hey friends, welcome to session 7 of Collectives, where we're discussing play and story. This is one of those things, I don't know that we think about it, but what's so funny is that story is actually ingrained in us. We're constantly narrating things in our heads. And so I guess I'd love to start off by asking, what is the first story, whether it's something you read, something your parents read to you, a movie you saw that you remember having a deep impact on you? Like even to this day, it still kind of marinates in there.
The first one?
Or an early one, just the first story that comes to mind.
I think the one that it was the most significant for my childhood was when my dad and I read the Chronicles of Narnia together when I was a kid. And so every night before bed we would read some of the story. And I just remember being so captivated by all of the characters. And it was something where you could really, I don't know, like I felt like I could see myself in Lucy and Susan's lives and sort of was swept up in it.
Yeah. Christian staple.
Christian staple.
Right there. Which book? Which one?
Which one was my favorite?
Yeah. Was it
Probably
Probably
The Magician's Nephew was my favorite. I really enjoyed it.
It's a great choice. Yeah.
Wow.
What about you?
I would have said Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Oh,
That one's
that is so
the adventure and everything. My earliest memories were also Bible stories, and I just remember there was a picture book that my mom and dad would read to me of the healing of the leper, and I don't know why that was just one that stuck with me. But the way that you phrased the question, the story, or it was a movie that I can't help it. So I saw Star Wars
Let's go.
in the theaters.
In theaters.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
old.
Let's
1977.
That age. Oh, okay. I was trying to be.
It was 78.
I know.
Yeah, it was 78 because it came out in like Christmas of 77, and
Dude, I thought you were in your 30s, man.
Yeah. It was. I mean, there was nothing like it, and it just blew the imagination wide open, and it's still that like. So I'm disappointed by the recent stories.
Yeah.
For sure. But that was one that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're such a better pastor than I.
What?
Because when I think about things that had an early on impact, I really go back to like Bruce Lee and Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Come on.
He just really, I had this like, it shaped the way I saw manhood. Like I need to be like just yoked up. I need to know how to do splits, and I need to find.
Never known a man who could do the splits.
I just Jean-Claude Van
Hey,
Damme.
my son. Yeah.
There you go.
And you had to be the rescuer in situations.
Yes.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
And I think some of the story that I got from friends and family lent itself to that,
Right.
to what masculinity should look like.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to kind of hear from you, when you think about the things that you heard from influential people in your life, whether it was a parent or a friend, how did that inform who you should be, who you ought to be?
Yeah.
That is
See,
one I feel.
I know. I have to
Like I
take
need a
pause.
second to.
Well, so I'll
Yeah.
give you an example. My dad unintentionally, he didn't mean to do this, but as an emotional kid, he tried to coach me through how to manage that.
Yeah.
And what he would tell me was, don't let people know what you're thinking. He was And he was trying to do that in a loving way, like,
Right.
hey, don't let people know they hurt you. Don't let people know that they got you. Don't let people know that they're making you angry. You know, be calm and collect. And that's what he tried to do. What it translated to was be guarded, trust no one.
Right.
Don't ever let anyone know how you feel
Yeah.
or whether they've hurt you. And it was something I've really had to work through to unravel in my head.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um,
I mean,
There's a narrative.
there's a narrative
comes
there.
with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a story there.
Right. Right.
yeah, that absolutely has been a part of my story. Also, my dad, and just he was a Asian stoic father, unaffectionate, unemotional. Like that was the picture of father. But because of that, I was always clamoring for his attention, for his affection, for his approval, and he never. It wasn't a conscious thing that he did, but he didn't know any better, and it really wrote my story into adulthood, and still, I like now, so many years later, having watched Star Wars, like it still lingers. That of trying to achieve, trying to perform, trying to win the approval of someone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good, Josh.
Yeah, I think for me I grew up with 5 older siblings, and so it felt like the story was constantly changing. It was whatever was the story of the moment. You know, if someone was in trouble, that was the story. If somebody was doing really well, that was the story. I think naturally being the youngest, there was a lot of sort of attention on me and kind of what I was doing and the noise that I was making or whatever. But I think for the most part it was pretty positive in the way that my parents ended up handling all of that, because I think when you have so many maybe competing stories, it would be easy to get lost kind of in the midst of that. But I think at some point my parents shifted from like a communal parenting of kind of everybody to parenting each one of us individually, which I think made me feel like my story really mattered. And so
Wow.
so it wasn't necessarily dependent. It was connected to all my siblings' stories, but it mattered in its own right because they were looking at it as my story and the way that they, you know, interacted with me. Because like my brother and I are 2.5 years apart, the closest one in age to me, and we are worlds apart. He was quiet. He was more reserved. He was, you know, really smart and creative, and I was a bulldozer. Like, just like wanted to be playing outside in the mud and like, you know, going wild. And so if my mom had parented us the same way, it would have been like, here's the story of our family, but you don't have necessarily a place in it. And it felt like really my parents did a good job of giving each one of us our own story.
I love that.
Wow.
I love
Wow.
because what you're saying is one of the ways that I've been able to live this out in a healthy way is by
Yeah.
being seen,
Right.
feeling seen.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the folks that are watching are wondering, okay, so how do I do this?
Yeah.
Because to delve in and do that work doesn't feel like play. You know, you're going to a therapist or you're sitting there journaling. That's
Yeah.
not playful. But what I'm hearing you say is there's something within community that helps us kind of heal in that space. You know, we've talked
Yes.
about feasting with others
Yeah.
and whatnot. So I'd love to hear from you, like from your perspective, what does it look like to enter into a space where we can be present
Right.
and help others help us figure out, okay, am I living in a false narrative or am I living in a narrative, in a kingdom narrative?
I think it's when we have those spaces where we can begin to unveil our stories,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
like even to become aware of those stories, but to tell the stories to others, to say it, to speak it. like I think that's a really significant thing, and we need those kind of spaces that are safe,
Right.
that are welcoming of stories to come out.
Do you
And
feel like
good
that's-
questions?
Do you feel like that's play right
Oh,
there?
yeah.
To be vulnerable and transparent that way.
Well,
Is that play? Does it feel like play?
yeah. That's
I think it depends. I mean, like, but I think what it unlocks play, because I think what it ends up doing when you are seen and your story is known is it invites you into a story that isn't just the heaviness.
yeah.
Because I think sharing stories with each other gives us imagination for life, and so it might be like, man, yeah, I had this hard story and this hard thing, but I get to hear your story, which looks different and has a different perspective. And that gives me an imagination for what my life could be or what my story could look like. And I think that's really what the Lord does.
Mm.
Like the Lord awakens our imaginations to life with him. And when that happens, we are always being invited into a better story.
I love that. And it doesn't always have to be heavy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? It
Right.
could be
Yeah.
fun.
Yes, we
can
have great
joke
stories.
around. Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Yeah, my wife and I were invited over to some members of the church just for dinner. And after we shared this great meal, it was a huge spread. All these families, these couples were around the table, and we just started like asking each other questions of how we met each other. And it was kind of like spilling all of these marbles out on the table because we laughed so hard. All of the yeah. How do we meet? What did we really think of each other? And it just and we went from couple to couple all the way around, and it was just so fun.
Right.
But it was a moment where all of our stories got to be held, got to be shared, and it was far. It really knit us together. Like when we see these couples now on a Sunday morning, like it's great fun. They begin to feel more and more like old friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really kind of reflects on a bit of what Liz said. It's we have our own individual stories. And when we feel like we've been seen,
Yeah.
we're able to experience the whole story together in just a more meaningful way. That's cool. So, well, thanks for joining us for this week's Collective. We hope that as you're hanging out at home, you can figure out a way to be transparent and to share stories, and hopefully those stories are encouraging you.